Alrighty, time for those percents lesson 2 FFS notes. We are looking at talking about markups today. So once you create your FFS page in your notebook, you're going to go ahead and put markups as a big idea. And before we get into what all that means, let's just look at a question here. We're going to be writing out 3 word problems, so write small. We need to have these examples in our notes. So, a store pays $42 for a pair of inline skates. And marks them up by 25%. How much was the markup? Well, we need to know what a markup actually is, so let's go to our vocabulary and talk about the definition. A markup is actually the difference between the amount that a business pays for a product and the amount the business sells the product for. So, the difference between the amount that a business pays for a product and the amount the business sells the product for. It's not great grammar, but it is the definition. The difference between the amount that a business pays for a product and the amount the business sells the product for. And so when we talk about when the business sells the product, we call that selling price. And that's the amount the store sells the item for, also called retail price, and this includes the markup. The amount the store sells the item for, also called retail price. And it includes markup. So to make sure we understand, markup is an amount over what they paid, and a markup rate is the percent of markup. And we know that percent is based out of 100. And so what we're talking about is whatever the amount is that they paid, that's the 100%. And then the percent of markup is a portion of that, a percentage of that gets added back on. So when we go back to the question that we were asked, and it asks us, how much was the markup? It's not asking for the price after the markup. It's asking for the amount that was actually marked up. So what we need to look at is the fact that it's $42 and there's a markup based on that. So X out of 42 is going to be 25 out of 100. Because remember that part to whole is percent out of 100. And what we're talking here is markup compared to original. And we can solve this with cross multiplication, where we look at X times 100 and 42 times 25. I'm going to use the space to the right instead of underneath to try and save a little space to fit in the next 2 questions. So we have 100x equal to 1,050, and when we divide both sides by 100, X is 10.5. So the markup is $10.50. That's the actual answer. Something to consider is that if I wanted to know the whole or the selling price, that's going to come from adding to the $42. Add $10.50 to 42, and the selling price would be $52.50. We weren't asked for that, but that's where it would come from. Number 2 says a store pays for a pair of sneakers and marks them up by 20% before selling them for $30. So a store pays for a pair of sneakers and marks them up by 20% before selling them. Oops. For $30. How much did the store pay for the sneakers? So we need to really think about what this is talking about. So we're looking for the original amount. We know they've been marked up by 20%, and we know that they're selling them for $30. So what we're really talking about is the selling price compared to the original. Why is that important? Because we know the selling price is $30, but we don't know the original. But we do know that the original is 100%. So if they've been marked up by 20%, then that means we're really talking about 120%. Another way to think about this is to look at the fact that we have a proportional equation that we could use where we say the new price, $30, is equal to 120% times the original. Well, 120% is 1 2/10 times X. So the proportion can help us look at the equation and vice versa. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and solve by dividing both sides by 1 2/10 and find out that X is actually 25. So ta-da, the store's cost was $25. Remember, their cost is the original. All right, we're going to try and squeeze in our last question here. A store pays $20 for a game and marks it up to $26. What was the markup rate? So, a store pays $20 for a game and marks it up to $26. What was the markup rate? You can solve this multiple ways. I'm going to show you how I'm going to solve it. That doesn't mean that you always have to solve it this way. But I'm basically going to say if $26 is the new cost, I'm still looking at selling price compared to original. And it's 26 compared to 20, so that's what percent of the original? Let's use cross multiplication here to say that 20 times X is equal to 26 times 100, which is 2600. Divide both sides by 20, and I find out that the selling price percentage is 130%. But what does that really mean? It means the markup rate is only 30%. Because the original is 100%. and they sold it for 130%, which makes the increase 30%. Wrap your brain around that for a second. Pretty logical. And so what's our procedure that we have to keep in mind? Well, there's a lot of different things that we can think about, but one of the most important things is that original or cost is 100%. That's huge. We can use proportions or an equation to find the markup amount and then add to cost amount. Use proportions or an equation to find markup, messy, amount. Then add to cost amount. Of course, that's if necessary. And then finally, combine percents and use a proportion or an equation to find the new amount. Now, that can go both ways, because we could talk about having a new amount, and that's a combination of percents, just like the last question we just answered. And there you have it. There's markups. When you're done, your beautiful notes page, for FFS notes that is, should look like this.